President welcome at Ijoma Onyato tonight. Vice President Oshibajo advocates rejigging of the Buhari administration anti-corruption strategy to ensure success of the campaign. Federal High Court orders service of summon on former President Goodluck Jonathan within 5 days in the case of alleged money laundering against former PDP spokesman Olisametu. 8 feared killed as Boko Haram militants launch an attack on military base in Damaturu local government area of Yobe State. And opposition leader Raila Odinga asks supporters to stay at home tomorrow as the country holds presidential rerun poll. And on business news tonight, Nigeria's Minister of Finance unveils federal government's plan to borrow $3 billion to finance legacy debts.
And on sports news, Nigeria's Women's Football League champions Nasarawa Masons received 10 million naira reward for their performance by the state government.
And from Abuja, 3 cases of suspected monkeypox virus reported in Delta State as authorities intensify efforts to curtail spread.
We begin tonight from Abuja, where the Vice President today announced that the time has come to open a new page in the anti-corruption campaign to make it succeed against the backdrop of the unfolding drama in the crusade to rid Nigeria of the menace. Professor Yemi Oshibajo dropped this hint at the opening of a capacity-building forum for judges and justices organized by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and the National Judicial Institute. The Vice President explained that the administration is rejigging the entire anti-corruption system, including a change in the attitude to investigations and trial of corruption cases. Our correspondent Gloria Umezuke reports.
The federal government has made no secret of its mantra to holistically fight corruption in spite of criticisms across the board. But now it appears the presidency is doubling its anti-corruption crusade, a decision clearly spelled out at this gathering of judges in Abuja.
In the last administration, 2 weeks before elections, cash in excess of 100 billion naira and over $250 million was released in a few days, ostensibly for security purposes. The aggregate sum released was more than some states earned in a whole year. The enormous resources in the hands of perpetrators today is used to subvert justice, to bribe liable senior government officials, to bribe in some cases judicial officers, to subvert the legislative process, and of course, to subvert even the press. The problem with corruption is that it is a cancer. It may be terminal if not checked. This is the time for us to open a new page in the entire anti-corruption fight. It's time to open a new page.
The Vice President did not only give the assurance of the executive support, but points out that most countries that have successfully fought corruption focused on the offense and not technicalities.
Investigations must be done properly. Investigations must be conducted properly, not on the pages of the newspapers, but they must be conducted properly and thoroughly before cases go to court. So that when cases go to court, what is presented is the best possible case that the prosecution can present. Why should terrorism be more strictly viewed than corruption cases? If you look at the extent of damage that is caused by corruption, it surely is a crime against humanity.
Much of the fight against corruption may be yielding results, but it clearly has become imperative for the government to go the extra mile. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Now, it's no secret that corruption has remarkably hampered Nigeria's quest for development. Successive administrations have agreed that the menace needs to be nipped in the bud, but their efforts have always seemed to fall short of expectations. There's been a weight of expectation on the Buhari administration to tackle the problem effectively, and this special report tonight takes a look at the challenges of the present anti-graft war.
When President Muhammadu Buhari took the oath of office in May 2015, it was probably his promise to tackle corruption that Nigerians clung to the most, given his towering reputation for intolerance of graft. But a couple of years down the line, and corruption appears to be not only a formidable foe, but also an elusive and invasive one. Identifying and defining corruption in order to pin it down has proven quite tricky, especially in the courts of law, which wield the sword of justice required to slay the monster. As the government of the day began flexing its muscles to grapple with its fearsome adversary, the spectre of corruption reared its head in the highest reaches of the administration.
Most of the contracts awarded by Pine have no direct bearing on the lives of displaced persons apparently languishing in hunger.
A Senate committee probing spending of funds earmarked for internally displaced persons in the Northeast found the then Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Babachir Lawal, complicit in a 200 million naira grass-cutting contract scam. After some due diligence, President Buhari eventually suspended Mr. Lawal on April the 19th, 2017. That same day, the nation's spy chief, Ayo Oke, was also suspended in connection with 13 billion naira discovered in an apartment in a highbrow neighborhood of Ikoyi in Lagos. Mr. Oke, the suspended Director General of the National Intelligence Agency, apparently fell victim to the newly introduced whistleblowing policy of the government aimed at uncovering stolen funds and other corrupt practices. The forces in the fight against corruption also seem to be divided, as the senators steadfastly refused to accept the president's chosen spearhead in the anti-graft campaign, EFCC acting chairman Ibrahim Magu. Even the judiciary has had to face the anti-corruption searchlight. In September 2016, 7 justices were arrested by the Department of State Services in sting operations across the country. At the moment, the nation is still reeling under another of corruption's sleek moves, the return and reinstatement in the Federal Civil Service of the fugitive chairman of the Pension Reforms Board, Abdurrashid Maina. Mr. Maina, who had been declared wanted by the EFCC for pension fraud, has since been fired on the orders of the president. But even the ruling party, the APC, has expressed shock and outrage at the insidious dimensions this menace has assumed. Perhaps the declaration by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo that the anti-corruption fight needs a revival underscores the importance of new and effective tactics to defeat the beast. Charles Eruka, the Channels Television News.
To discuss this administration's anti-corruption war, I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by a civil rights activist and public affairs analyst, Mr. Ezenwa Mwagu. He joins me from Abuja. Thanks for joining us on the news at 10.
Thank you and good evening.
Yeah, let me start off from the Vice President's comment today, where he said the time has come to open a new page in this anti-corruption campaign. Now, what do you make of that, seeing that their campaign is about 2 years old? We're 2 years old in the fight, and this comment is coming now.
Well, that's a very shocking admission by the Vice President that perhaps this is the lowest ebb in the past 2 years of the fight against corruption. The President himself, by his lack of initiative in dealing with folks who are close to him, has deliberately subverted whatever gains that have been made. And so the Vice President asking for a rejuvenation of the fight is pointing to the fact that right now what is required will be that force of personal example by not just the President, but all the institutions that have responsibility to ensure that people who put their dirty hands in our common, in the public till do not get away with it. It needs rejuvenation because you can't continue to have committees set up and reports of those committees will continue to gather dust in the office of the President. Of course, you know the Babachir Lawal's report, you know the Oke report, you know the petition around the MTN against the chief of staff to the president. All of those issues actually have been swept under the carpet. And that has put a hole, a big, very big hole in the confidence of Nigerians in the ability of this administration to rein in the abuses and infractions that we have seen in the country. But be that as it may, I think that message is coming quite timely now, because the fight has to be taken away from being President Buhari's anti-corruption fight and owned by the people. The Nigerian people will have to own this fight and ensure that, you know, the pressure is put on the government, whether it's President Buhari's government or any other government for that matter, because majority of the citizens are the direct victims of the consequence of this menace. Well, so I think it's a welcome call.
If I may just cut you off there slightly, it's interesting that you say the fight should be taken, you know, to the doorstep of the average Nigerian. You're from civil society as well. What should the role of civil society be at a time like this? A lot of people have criticized civil society for not speaking up enough. Do you think that that's a valid comment for them to make?
Well, sometimes I often make the joke that people tend to want to see civil society as that category that would always put forward their head for the coconut to be broken so that every other person will partake of it. But like I said, it is everybody's fight. Civil society, the media, citizens generally have responsibility to fight corruption everywhere we find it. And once we build this personality cult around the anti-corruption fight and make it President Buhari's, it alienates. It makes people to feel that it is just one of those, like you have 7-point agenda of Yaradua, you have transformation by Jonathan, and that this one too will pass. But the consequence of corruption is directly, you know, on the people. So if the people don't fight corruption, government in, government out will continue to use that as a strategy and I mean as a mantra, and once it is a mantra, it will not have the kind of effect that we require of it.
Okay,
so
now you're talking about...
I don't think it is a fair comment. I don't think it's a fair comment to say that civil society has not been speaking out. Most of the issues that have been raised even on Babachir, on Oke and all of that are direct consequences of some of the impetus that civil society has brought to the
everybody seems to have their own 2 cents about what this fight should be. We say fight corruption. Now, the form and the structure of the fight is something that still remains unclear, even to those who are trying to fight it. So is it really a case of selective justice that you see? What form should this fight take? Some people have talked about all the monies that are being recovered. What is the plan for those monies in an economy like ours? Do you see a clear strategy in terms of that?
Well, I think that, as you know, there is an anti-corruption strategy that talks more about the institutions rather than the people. And not quite a lot of people also are aware about what that anti-corruption strategy is. But for selectivism, I also would always tell you that how I wish that every government that comes will selectively rein in all the people, all the enemies of the people who are cornering our common patrimony. If they do that, in the space of 16 years, we will have been able to rein in quite a good number of folks who are putting their hands in our common strategy. I mean, in our common patrimony. But going with your question, in terms of structure, we need to nip and close all the holes that make it possible for people to take away what belongs to all of us. The law and order regime need to be strengthened. When people know that they are not likely going to get away, when we are not going to have a MENA kind of situation, when people know they will go to prison if they infract on the law, especially corruption, the likelihood of corruption reducing will be clear. But when we know that people will get away, they will find a way. It will be defined as I mean, the Attorney General of the Federation would explain away things on national that are acting on national interest. Then a lot of people will not have a reason to rein in themselves. So we need to be clear in terms of the law and order regime in the country. That's the difference between us and any other country. everywhere people, the propensity for corruption is high, but when people know they are going to pay the price, that itself will become the restraining factor. So we need to pay attention on education, we need to pay attention on the law and order regime, and ensure that people pay the price for the things that they do wrongly. All right, Public Affairs Analyst Mr. Ezenwa Nwagu, thank you so much for joining us on the News at 10 tonight. And in part 2, after the break, 2 persons killed and 2 others injured by gunmen in Riom local government area of Plateau State. That's in a moment. Do stay with us.